Hi everybody, welcome back. This is Avrohom Czapnik from the Jewish Learning Exchange in Los Angeles. I hope you and yours are great and you had a wonderful, meaningful, and happy and enjoyable Passover holiday. This week's Torah portion is actually action-packed. It's Tazria-Metzora, as well as Rosh Chodesh. It's the new month of Iyar. So we actually take out two Torah scrolls, one for the regular Torah portion, Tazria-Metzora, and the other one for reading Rosh Chodesh about the new month. But let's go back to last week's portion for a minute. Parshat Shemini talks about kosher animals. Now, kosher animals have signs. A kosher animal must have two signs, split hoofs and shuetz cut. A kosher fish also has two signs, fins and scales. But birds don't have signs. They have characteristics. Birds of prey are not kosher. And one of the non-kosher birds is called the chasida bird. And if that word sounds a little familiar to some of you, chasida comes from the word chesed. And Rashi's commentary tells us that it does chesed with its friends. So the question that the Chidush, one of the great Hasidic masters, asks, if it does chesed with its friends, if it does loving kindness, and we look at the characteristics of the birds to determine whether they're kosher or not, if they're birds of prey that doesn't have a good character, so we don't eat it. So the chasida bird, which does chesed, loving kindness, which is with its friends, that should be a kosher bird. And he answers a beautiful insight, and he says it's only doing acts of loving kindness with its friends. It's particular who it helps. And if we're particular with who it helps, that's not kosher. We have to be open to helping everyone. And this relates to this week's parasha as well. The Torah teaches us that if the Kohen, the priest, looks at a skin ailment known as tzaraas, which we do not have today, it's a physical manifestation of a spiritual failure, and the Kohen declares the man has tzaraas and he is now ritually unclean and is required to leave all the three camps of the Jewish people and must be isolated by himself outside the camp. So our sages teach us that he has to declare tameh tameh, he is ritually unclean on his way out of the camp. So the obvious reason why he does that is so that he doesn't contaminate anybody and make someone else tameh. However, there's a deeper reason here as well. We want the people to pray for him that he should be healed soon and be able to go back into society. Now, who is he saying tameh to? He's saying it to strangers on the street. But that teaches us an important lesson about anybody who we hear needs a need, even if we don't know them, we should pray for them. Famous story about the great Chafetz Chaim. Someone came to visit him and saw him praying and crying and saying psalms. And he asked the man, what's wrong? The man asked, why is the Chafetz Chaim praying so intensely? He says, someone's very sick and he's praying on his behalf. He says, it must be a relative. He says, no, not a relative. A good friend? No, he doesn't even know the person. But he had such a feeling for a fellow Jew that he prayed so intensely. And recently, just over Pesach, two beautiful stories. Unfortunately, Montreal had a terrible storm, had a power outage. And fellow religious Jews from Brooklyn and Lakewood traveled to Montreal, Canada, on the holiday with generators to help the community. They left their families and just went to join to see what they could do to give some power to some people at least. Orlando, Florida, there was some people that were stuck on a flight. There was delays and more delays and more delays, and the FAA didn't allow finally when the plane was fixed, they didn't allow this flight crew to fly because they had been up too long. They had to get a new flight crew. It was just delays and delays and delays. And the Chabad rabbi in Orlando heard about these people who he did not know, who didn't have kosher food for many hours. And he came to deliver to them, but they didn't let him in because he didn't have a ticket. So he bought a ticket and set up shop in the waiting area and gave free food, kosher food, to all the people who wanted. Our idea is to feel and to care for other people, especially our fellow brothers and sisters, without necessarily knowing who they are. Maybe they're not our type, maybe they're a little bit different, maybe they're more religious, less religious, not religious, doesn't make a difference. But we are part of one people. And not coincidentally, in our prayers, we use the plural all the time. Rifa'enu, heal us. Redeem us. Help us. It's in the plural. We're not only praying for ourselves and for our family and for our community, but for the entirety of the Jewish people and ultimately for the world. And this is our an important lesson, both from last week's portion about the Hasidah bird that isn't kosher because it only helps its friends, and about the person saying tameh, impure, so that other people, even who don't know him, pray in his behalf. And the example of the rabbi in Orlando that helped people, or the people from Brooklyn who traveled, and Lakewood, New Jersey, who traveled to Montreal on the holiday to help their fellow brothers and sisters that were without power. May we be inspired to always think and feel other people's pain and joy, and do whatever we can to help them, because we're all part of one big Jewish family. Have a great Shabbos. All the best.